that way we find ourselves kind of repeating those same things, especially in moments of stress. And I don't know, parenting is like moment of stress, followed by moment of stress, followed by moment of stress.
One of the things that you have to say to people is most folks think they're fine until they have kids. And then look at both of you. That podcast is coming right up. First up, let me tell you about a couple of our resource partners. So almost every week of my life for the last 2 years, somebody will ask me about the retreat that changed my life. And I'm so proud to present Spirit Quest as one of our official resource partners. Founded in 2007, it's the holistic wellness center that changed my life, helped me overcome anxiety, helped me work through conflict, gave me all these tools to manage stress, and they would love to do the same thing for you. To connect to Spirit Quest, click the link on our resources tab at learnfrompeoplewholivedit.com. And when you get on the phone with them, make sure you mention that you heard it on Learn From People Who Lived It. Another incredible resource partner is Eric's House, a community for healing after addiction, suicide, or sudden loss. It's peer support for healing broken hearts, and the people there are incredible. Link to their website on the resources tab at learnfrompeoplewholivedit.com.
Looking for no bullshit conversation about mental health? Find Learn From People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from people who lived it.
Welcome to another episode of Learn From People Who Lived It.
Well, this is going to be interesting today. You ever have those moments where you're on the phone with somebody and then you start thinking about somebody else and you go, I need to bring all of those people into the room together because I think that there's a conversation to be had here. That's exactly why we have the two individuals that you see on the screen. Now, those of you who have listened to Learn From People Who Lived It in the past, you know Jennifer L.W. Fink. She's the author of the book Building Boys, and she's been a guest on our podcast before. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I have just come to meet Brad through a series of cool universal events. Brad's the founder and senior partner at Thunderbird Advisors Group, and he's been doing a lot of work on not just himself, but this idea around parenting, and we're going to dive into that in just a little bit. But I'll tell you, I think there's some depth about to be had here in this conversation, and if you guys will give me a second, I just want to read something that Brad sent to me. And Brad, I hope you don't mind, but this is the opening chapter to your book.
By all means.
It says, the intricate dance of genetics and heritage. Our lineage gifts us with a spectrum of attributes, from the curve of our smile to the timbre of our laughter. While DNA can indeed provide us a biological script detailing our lineage and ancestral connections, it does not dictate the narratives we choose to author in our lives. Your genes might reveal where you come from, but your choices determine where you're going to go. And I love that so very much because, it's based so much on my idea of being that transitional character in your lineage and being the one who breaks the generational cycles and being the one who's here to take your family and move them out of dysfunction and move them into a better place where we can have happier and healthier relationships with each other. So I'm going to start with you, Brad, and then we're going to go to you, Jennifer. But what made you write that opening line? What genetics were you dealt that you were like, not for me?
Less so for me directly, Mathew. I mean, my dad's an Air Force veteran, so he's a military guy, but he never really fit the mold of that militant father. Always going to undo his belt buckle, and I better prepare for it. But as I've grown, I've had a lot of friends who have dealt with different types of addictions, whether they're drug addictions, alcoholism, sex addiction, whatever it is. And the negative impact that has on them directly is really profound. So one of my closest friends, his name is Josh Hallow. He's an Army Ranger, a West Point grad. I met him in grad school when we were in Beijing, China. He's the godfather of my son, Alec. At this point, he and I did a rim to rim to rim Grand Canyon hike a couple of years ago, actually 3 years ago this week, just kind of an overnight thing. And when you're out there, you have a lot of time to talk. And, one of the things that we were really focused on there was his PTSD. He had done a number of tours in Afghanistan, and he opened up to me on a lot of the things that he experienced, while in Afghanistan, and, throughout his life, he witnessed his father's suicide when he was a young boy. I didn't actually see it. They found his father, he's 4 years old at that point, and he carried that with him for a very long time. So one of the topics of conversation was parenthood, because he knows my kids very well. He knows how important that is to me. And he's one of those guys I always just envision being this awesome, fun, vibrant dad that can really raise the bar for what dads look like. But he always does it as like that funkle. He's that fun uncle that is, there with his nephews, with my kids doing these things. And I asked him, he's younger than I am by a few years, but I asked him, are you going to take that step at some point? And he was very much against it because of the mental illnesses and depressions that run through his family. And his fear was passing that on to a child. He would not want to pass those things on to another generation because of how hard it's been to deal with that. At this point, he has done a lot of things to learn how to address and really thrive despite the situations he's been in. Now, his approach is different than a lot of people, and I don't want to get into that too much because that's worth an entire year of these types of conversations. It's really fascinating stuff that he's doing there. But when you know somebody so well that deals with something so challenging, but they learn to overcome it, not by just kind of grinding and being a guy who just suppresses everything and survives based off of that, they figure out the right approach to really manage. Not just manage, but to really acknowledge and label and confront these feelings, these emotions, and the reasons behind it. You're able to really make some progress and move beyond what those things are. So when we had that conversation, I said to Josh, I was like, man, you don't have to pass those on. If you have an opportunity to figure out how to manage it and how to combat that, would you do it? And it created this pause. In a 24-hour hike, you have some moments. It was actually 19 hours, but I don't want to shortchange this. When you have these pauses in the conversation, it's not just because you have nothing to say. It's because you have these profound moments where you really want to process, what's being said and what's being discussed. So, going through that with him was a really big, I think, breakthrough for me, because I've never dealt with addiction myself. I've never dealt with, that I'm aware of, PTSD myself. I think that comes in all shapes, sizes, and forms, and perhaps we all have some sort of it at some level. But my wife also has, dealt with things that she's had to learn the process, which have allowed her to grow by just tremendous strides as a human being, and, dealing with the struggles years ago versus, processing, handling, and learning to cope, and then, moving beyond that while recognizing that it's still there. People can become completely new human beings just by making a decision in this moment right now. Every moment that passes is a chance to do that and make that choice.
So here's a good question for you, Jennifer, is like somebody who's focused on, creating better, I don't know if the word is better, but just building better boys. I'm just going to say better because we have
decent
a long
guys.
ways to go. Yeah, just decent human beings, right? How are we going to get to a place where what Brad's buddy is doing there, where he's doing the work on himself so that he can make life better for his family? Are we getting closer to a place where that's becoming more acceptable? Or are we still at a place where it's pull your bootstraps up and let's go and get on with it?
I'd say it's tipping in that direction, but we have a long way to go. And I think that there are differences depending on where you are at and what circles you move in. There is, generally speaking, more of a push towards recognizing the fact that all humans have emotions. All children have emotions, and there is a move away from this idea that I'm willing to bet both of you grew up with. Boys don't cry, man up. Dad's job is to make the money, and that's pretty much it. We are shifting away from that But it's not a complete shift. A lot of us were parented that way. We find ourselves kind of repeating those same things, especially in moments of stress. And I don't know, parenting is like moment of stress, followed by moment of stress, followed by moment of stress. And I don't know what I'm doing. And so I revert to things that I saw growing up. And it's very exciting for me, to hear about these conversations that you're having with your friend, Brad, because these are the kinds of conversations that have to happen for us to all collectively move forward and make it more acceptable. It wasn't that long ago where guys, boys, we didn't really think about preparing them for family life. We didn't think about preparing them to be parents. Your job was the provider, period.
Such a great point. And as I listen to you talk, I think one of the things that you have to say to people is most folks think they're fine until they have kids. And then look at both of you. And then it's like those kids come in and they show you every nook and cranny about who you are. They stir up all that stuff from your past. God, they are so good at it. And
there is nothing like seeing your worst moments and like your biggest flaws and faults coming back at you via your kid. And you get so frustrated and then you go, oh, wait.
That one's on me, actually.
Yeah. Oh, and I recently had one of these. My 23-year-old son, there was, as with anything, the topic doesn't matter. But I was getting so frustrated with him. I'm like, why do you do this? You get all upset about something. It's been going on for weeks or months. You don't tell anybody about it until it's like right here. And then somebody barely says something and I'm like, oh, wait. I think I do that. Yeah, Brad's pointing at himself too.
I have the same conversation with my 16-year-old daughter often. She is I'll say she's a good kid. I mean, she's a 16-year-old girl, drives herself to school, honor roll student. She's in a patient care program, all these things. She's in Bible studies 4 nights a week. She's got a boyfriend of 2 years now, which I never thought I'd have a 16-year-old daughter with a boyfriend for 2 years. Good kid, but he's a 16-year-old boy as well. But we go through those things where we...
What do you say, Brad?
Yeah, well, I was a 16-year-old boy. You were a 16-year-old boy. And as good as we may have been, but we were 16-year-old boys. It's, it's biology. So, she goes through these things, these situations where she will really be, moping and letting it just kind of like translate into everything that is going on. She'll allow it to affect how she relates with me, with her siblings, with her stepmom, with her mom, with everybody. And so my wife and I will, kind of have these conversations and help her try to navigate. But I find myself so often sending a late night text message from the other bedroom just saying, by the way, I love you. And I want to share with you that, what I'm telling you to work on or something to be aware of, I'm exactly the same way. So it's not me just trying to preach and say, oh, you. It's me saying, hey, I know from experience, what you're going through and you're reacting the same way I would. And it would be beneficial. It would be very helpful to learn to navigate that and manage that when you're 16 versus when you're, 41. And so, we have those conversations very often. And my goodness, you hit the nail on the head with, kind of pointing back at yourself when you're going through these things like, don't do this. Oh my gosh, do as I say, not as I do. That's really what it comes down to on those. Pretty funny.
But don't you think where we get ourselves in trouble is that we feel bad about it and we do that thing that you just said, which is where we feel bad about it and then we take that operating system into everything we do. And so our wife gets the worst version of us, our husband gets the worst version of us, our kids get the worst version of us because we feel crappy about this thing that we just did. It's so funny that we're having this particular conversation today because we were just having this whole discussion yesterday at our dinner table about how you can set things down and how, an event can happen. And, because the story goes like this, I had something happen in my life and it was just one of those things where I just couldn't drop it. All damn day, I was consumed by this thing. It affected my sleep that night. It was just, and it wasn't even that big of a deal.
Right.
But it just flipping floored 24 hours of my day. And I was trying to tell the boys, like, God, I'm hanging on to this thing and I just want to set it down. And I want you to know that's totally normal. And if you're hanging on to things that you feel like you need to set down, find a way to figure out how to set them down so that you don't keep bringing that stuff to all the people in your life. And I know we're all guilty of that. But Jennifer, here comes a question for you, which is, as somebody who's into your line of work, how important is it for moms and dads, parents in general, to model that behavior for their kids?
The longer I have parented, the more research I have done on this, the more convinced I am that modeling is the single most powerful tool we have. Your kids are all old enough. If you have a kid older than 4, you know that kids are fantastic BS detectors, and they can tell the difference between what you say and what you do. And especially when they get older and they get into the preteen and teen years, you can say all the right things, but if you're not living them, it's not going to make a difference. They don't listen to you anyway at that point, but they do notice what you do. So the most powerful thing we can do and the most effective thing we can do is work on our stuff, work on our emotional regulation, work on learning to put the thing down, Mathew. And you're sharing it with your family in real time is bringing them along with you in this process. So it's normalizing that, hey, this is a challenging thing that humans experience. You're a human. Yes, I'm a human who's been on this planet older than you. I know that your kids are old enough that they have passed the point where they think you can do everything. Like, they know you are not a superhero anymore.
It's gone.
So bringing them along and saying, hey, I am working on this and I'm sharing this with you, that is so powerful.
Yeah, I love the way you put that and kind of put a bow around it. It makes me, because it's easy to, and I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this either in your own lives or maybe you think you've kind of done this to your kids, but mom and dad could be in a pretty shitty mood and it's easy for the kid to think that they did something wrong or that they were the reason that, that this whole thing unfolded, when so many times, man, it has nothing to do with them. And that's another thing, right? To encourage more parents to make sure your kids know that when you're in a mood, it's like, this has nothing to do with you. I'm just dealing with something really stressful at work, or I'm just dealing with a really stressful situation, or, mom's brother really pissed her off this month, or whatever that is. But I love this idea, Jen, of bringing them with us. That's such a great way to think about it.
I feel like we have made some progress on this. And thank you for saying that, because, often we don't realize the progress that's happening in front of us. I don't notice how tall my kid has gotten because I live with him. I see him every day.
Right.
My 17-year-old will sometimes come home and be visibly in a mood, right? Everybody can relate to this. But there are times when he said to us, hey, it's not that I don't want to talk to you. It was a long day. I'm tired. I just want to eat my food right now and be on my phone.
Yeah.
Right? So He is taking that and he's sharing, it's not you, it's me. I just need this right now. And we can't take all the credit. I can't take all the credit for anything, but I'll take a little bit.
Yeah. So, Brad, I know you were a perfect dad to those girls and you never had any mistakes on the way up. But
they're calling in right now.
But you have an interesting circumstance in front of you where you had 2 kids and then there was a gap and then now you have a new son who's like a couple of years old, right?
Sure.
So it's so interesting to me to be able to pose this question to you, which is how different are you going to be this time around? What kinds of things are you going to learn to set down? Because I'm going to tell you right now, the first kid always gets the worst part. Second one, things tend to soften. Third one's like, your brother and sister will raise you. And 4 and on, like, good luck, right? So you're in a cool position where you get, I don't say a do-over, but you did have enough time to reset to understand what's important. So what are you doing differently? How are you doing it?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, again, you were spot on with the numbers there. My first daughter, you all hear, you drop a binky on the floor and it's like, oh gosh, got to sanitize this and everything else. Second child who, was the baby for 10 years. Now she's, the forgotten middle child and she embraces the role like you couldn't believe. She's an absolute riot. But the third is the first boy too. So, it takes it another level further. He's not getting a haircut until his 3rd birthday, so he looks like a caveman half the time. And, he's just really rambunctious and fun. But, I've got 2 teen daughters that, take on kind of a motherly role with him at times, which, is wonderful. It's great to see that, because he's not going to grow up with them for the most part. They'll be off doing their own thing. I work from home. And, when my daughters were younger, I didn't. I commuted to offices, whether I was in St. Louis or, back here in Arizona. So really, I would say the biggest thing, because I was always there physically with my daughters. I went to all of the poem recitations at school. I helped, prepare for spelling tests and, going through a divorce when they were so young, I felt like I had to take on a lot more roles than a typical dad would have to take on. But my girls were with me for only half the time. And, if you have fundamental differences in how you view the world from the other parent, you want to make sure that you are doing the best you can to offer that things that you're really passionate about and you believe in, especially with a moral compass or things of that nature. You want to really drive that home. But I would say, how much am I doing differently? A lot, percentage wise, who the hell knows? I'm 41 years old. I was 25 years old and scared when my first daughter was born. I wasn't, to your point earlier, we don't prepare guys to be parents. I had no intention of becoming a parent. And my whole life was, in the fast lane, having fun, try and make money and travel the world and do these things. But I tell you what, I have just burned in my head. There's a picture of me holding my daughter minutes after she was born, eyes wide open, just looking up at me. And in that moment, my life just absolutely changed completely. My priorities flipped. She became, the number one priority for me with everything. And so you go, all right, now I'm a provider, right? As you mentioned, but also kicking into high gear is that role of being the protector. I am not going to let anything happen to this kid. Same thing with my daughter. And while I still feel that way with my son, I know that there's so much more that comes from, the emotional intelligence and the mentorship side and, teaching them to be courageous and brave and kind and gentle and selfless and making it a point, not just to try and model it, because you're right. They're going to watch what you do, how you do it. They're going to listen to the tone. They're going to, see how do you interact with, my mom, whether it's my son's mom, who's my wife, who we're in a loving relationship, or my ex-wife, who, we have to be amicable. We're not going to be best friends, but how do I talk about her? These are things that you're modeling that are going to show kids, what you think is right and wrong. And I do want to make a point because, I think we can all agree that no matter how good you do as a parent, at some point, your children grow up and we all have free will to make our own choices. So you can do everything right. You can do everything. Well, you can't do everything right, but you can do so much good in raising a kid. And my parents did this with me. And when I went off on my own, the first, the day my freshman college soccer season ended, I had my first beer. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's party time now for a little bit. My parents didn't teach me to do that. It was just a choice I made with my own free will. I knew right from wrong. So, I think the understanding that you've got to focus on these things, especially with the boy. I want Alec, my son, to grow up being as emotionally aware as he can. We love his little outbursts and we love, trying to teach him to label that and these things. But I want him to be one of those boys where when he grows up, he doesn't have to suppress these things until he's 35 and start learning that it's okay to have these feelings. So, the other thing I will say is, I read a book a long time ago. It's called Glow Kids. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this book, but it's really taking a look at, we talk about screen addiction and kids with, screen time and everything else. When my first daughter was born, there wasn't enough data really to talk about the long-term implications. Mm-hmm. We have that data now. We have that data that can support and really demonstrate what some of these effects can be. So with my son, we're not just trying to limit the time in front of the TV, because we're both working parents, working from home, and we just kind of like juggle around, and the time blocking helps for sure. But what is actually being watched on that screen time. My daughters, when they were, preteens, they would watch YouTube videos, these unboxing videos, kids just opening toys. This is what kids were watching. I'm like,
yeah,
what is the appeal to this? So I think it really just comes down to the idea of being intentional with the time that you're spending with them. So, I've got a little shotgun bike seat on my mountain bike, and it's a little seat that sits in front of me. And so my son's not strapped in, but he sits in front of me, and we go for morning bike rides. So it's getting outdoors and it's exploring, it's playing in the dirt, it's getting dirty, and it's talking about what these are and that is, to make sure that these things that are really important, for kids to really learn, hey, don't hit that cactus because it's got owies, and he's going to slap a bunny ear cactus and have 1,000 little needles in his hand. We've been through that, and you'll learn by going through that. So, I want to protect, I want to teach, I want to mentor, but I also want my kids to fall down. I want my kids to make mistakes. I want them to. I don't want to have to push my kids to make sure you're studying for that test tomorrow. And then they,
good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, my kids are pretty responsible academically, but
I would like to point out that your son has not yet hit schools. All I'm saying, and I think that's what Mathew's thinking too. It's going to be a different story for your son than your daughter's.
I am certain of that. It is so different, guys. Raising him versus my girls. I had him at my middle child soccer practice the other night. And he's running around just, hanging out with a friend and just kind of talking. He's rolling in the dirt. The practice ended with this kid laying half in the dirt with one shoe on, one shoe off, half on the sidewalk, eating French fries that he's rubbing on the concrete before. I'm just kind of like, he's surviving.
I'm here for that. I want to shift us into another space right now. And Jennifer, I'm coming to you with this question first. I was watching this Instagram reel the other day, and it said parents are going to go through 3 stages with their kids. They're going to go through the stage where they idolize us. They're going to go through a stage where they demonize us, and then they're going to go through a stage where they humanize us. And you, as the resident here with the oldest kids, right? So you've got 17, 20, 23, 25. Yeah. So my oldest is only 17, and I think that's your oldest too, right? Brad is only 16 or yeah. And so you've got us by almost a decade, and so
God, I feel old, gentlemen.
No. Maybe you started before us. But here's the question: have you shifted out of the demonized stage with some of your boys, and at what age did you start to notice that shift?
I hope I am shifting out of that stage. There is a definite shift. And it is around that 17, 18, 19, for boys anyway. I can't speak to girls because I don't have any daughters. But it is that demonizing is so common, and it can be so distressing to parents. I mean, you go from being idolized to being demonized. Talk about a demotion. And it lasts for years. We're not talking about a day. It lasts for years. And nobody can be cruel like your own teenage child. They know your stuff, and they will poke. And they pull away. That's the other thing. A lot of moms, especially, feel that very acutely because, their kids don't want anything to do with them anymore, and other people are more important. And I miss my son. By the time it's like their senior year of high school, you start to realize they're sort of pleasant to be around sometime. It's not this constant battle. And so they do start coming around. And the 23-year-old graduated from college last year. He lives maybe 20, 25 minutes away. He comes home and he always makes it a point to find me and hug me. That's awesome. I love that. He was not doing that when he was 16. He was not. Yeah. And that said, there's still moments, there's things. I think that this humanizing stage is going to last a very long time. There are things they are still not going to get until they're in their 40s, until they realize, oh, there were all these other components going on. But I think we're getting there.
Uh-huh. What stage are you in with your girls, Brad?
This is hysterical because it's a topic of conversation right now. My 13-year-old daughter, my gosh, she, up until 3 months ago, I'm still the hero. She's going to live with us forever. And, she's always, climbing on me like a spider monkey, giving me a kiss goodbye when I drop her off at school, giving me a kiss in front. She would walk at driveline at school and see my car and start blowing me kisses from 50 yards away. Literally changed overnight, like 3 months ago, where it's like, and I told her a month later, I was like, I recognize that this happened, but just so you know, this is how life goes. I'm not, heartbroken over it, which I'm not. Of course, you love that, but you want your kids to grow up and you want your kids to spend time with friends versus just at home with the family, all the time. So my son still, is back and forth between, he's the macho man, Randy Savage, and then he's cuddling, the next minute. Of course, it's every toddler in the world. What I will say is it's interesting with girls versus boys. So Jennifer, you were talking about with mothers feeling, this separation. I had a conversation with my ex-wife a few months ago where our oldest daughter was really, pushing back on that relationship. And that never happened with me. She doesn't share everything with me. You don't want them to. You're allowed to have some privacy. And there are things I certainly don't want to know. But as long as it's not jeopardizing her safety and well-being, like, okay, be a kid. But seeing that difference the way, and part of it's just the individual relationship, the trust and everything that's there, but seeing it with my own sister, when she just kind of pushed away from my dad, she was bad with him for a while. And now, it's the most loving relationship when they get together and still kiss the parents and everything at, 45 years old. Like it's an affectionate thing. So it's just the timing of this because of my 13-year-old daughter. I'm just cracking up and trying to contain myself because it's been thick, that difference. It's been very palpable.
I noticed that for me with my boys, it started at around 14. 14 was that mark where they started shifting a little bit. And then I'm kind of hopeful with something you just said, Jennifer, because my oldest is 17. He's a junior in high school, but he's a summer birthday. So he's a little bit older. Okay. And he is. I'm noticing these glimpses of softness in there with him. And it's like, we just had like a pleasant 2 hours together. That was incredible.
That was exactly what it was like for me. There'd be moments I'm like, wait. Yeah. That was not terrible. Which, so awesome. Goes to show what it was like for a few years in there.
Oh, man. It's and kind of going back to what we said earlier, right? It's easy for our kids to get in that mood and for us parents to take it really personal. Yes. And and just like the anger thing, and they think that like the same thing happens for us. And you're like, God, am I a garbage parent? Am I just sucking at this? What is wrong with me? I see all these other people out there and they look like they have amazing relationships with their kids. I am screwing this up. Isn't that such a thing?
It's exactly a thing. And that's partly why I think these conversations are so important because the more we know, like, it's not just me. This is everybody and it's normal. That helps. And otherwise, if our kid is going through their stuff, and we've all gone through puberty too. Like, it's kind of horrible and it's a really tough time. And so they've got all of that. And then we've got our parental, we're beating up on ourselves. We're feeling bad. We're dragging that around. Well, that is not a healthy combination there. It's not. And so if we can recognize that, set it aside, and then take some time to deal with ourselves, that's how we can be more present for our kids and not drive ourselves crazy in the process.
Yeah, I think if there's if there's some theme in this particular podcast, it's kind of like bring people along with you. Let them know where you stand with them along the way. And like if my kid does the same thing that yours does, Jennifer, which is like he'll just say, Dad, I just had a really long day at school and work and I'm just tired. And then I go, okay, cool. It's not me. Let me bug out of this situation. But that feels like such a simple, but yet a tool that most parents are going to toss away or most kids are going to toss away because it takes so much effort to say what I'm going through.
Was it always like that for you though, Mathew? Were you always able to do that and just kind of say, hey, they're going through it and I'm going to let my kid go to their room and just kind of be alone? Or, in my case, and I know other people, it took time to learn to allow that. And, it's just want my kid to be okay. So she's going through something and I want to help and I want to fix this and everything else.
Yeah, it does take a minute to learn it, but I hopefully, so I was at a huge disadvantage before I had my kids in that I took this training called Love and Logic, and I encourage every parent on planet Earth to take the Love and Logic training. And it just gave my wife and I so many different tools to use. And one of them was those difficult moments and how to navigate them. And so it is this idea of like, I let go of that. He just needs to go freak out. I'm going to let him drain out for 30 seconds or 45 seconds or a minute. And then I'll scoop him in my arms and he'll fall asleep in 2 minutes, right? Like you just get better at those things. And I don't know if I would like your perspective on this, Jennifer. As men, we have this stereotype of just wanting to fix everything. Mm-hmm. I don't know that a lot of moms are dissimilar. Don't you kind of want to fix things too?
No, you're absolutely right. And especially when it comes to our kids, yes, we want to fix it. We want to fix it so much because we stereotypically, right, women more empathetic because we've been taught to be more attuned to the feelings of others. It's especially in our generation. And so we feel the pain of our kids, which is another reason why we want to fix it, because I can't feel good if you're feeling bad. And that's all kinds of dysfunctional and stuff to work on. But this learning to step aside, Brad, I heard you say that you want your kids to fail and to have to get up. And it's uncomfortable to watch it happen and to see them go through the process. But it is necessary because they have to learn that they can fix their own problems. It's tough.
Brad, feels like a good place for you to jump in. How will you do that differently with your boys than you did your girls? Do you feel like you gave them enough of an opportunity to fall down, or do you feel like you tried to control too much?
I think I probably retarded it a little bit over time. I learned to allow that to happen as they probably hit like the preteen, age group. And now, with my 16-year-old in particular, we're preparing her. She's a junior as well. We're preparing her for, life on her own. And, if she's, gone to Flagstaff at NAU or University of New Hampshire, wherever, we're not going to be there to, fix these things. And, we shouldn't be there to fix these things. So it's really what helps me is when we're going through these challenging times, or she's going through these challenging times, we'll be a resource. We'll be a shoulder. We'll be an ear. But we'll listen to understand versus, listening to respond. You've heard all that. And sometimes we'll get feedback, and I'll ask for permission from my daughter, my 16-year-old, to give feedback. Do you want me to, speak, or do you want me to listen? Do you want me to, help you navigate this, or do you just need to get it off your chest? But afterwards, my wife and I will have private conversations about what's going on. And that's where emotionally for me, those feelings of like, oh man, this hurts. I know what she's going through. I don't need to keep that buried inside either. I can still get that off my chest and speak about it and talk about my feelings so that I'm not holding them inside just because it's not a situation that has to do with me as myself. With my kids going through it, I still have those feelings and we all go through that. So we still have to process our feelings on that. But with my son, I think going through all of this now at 41 years old, by the time he's a teenager, we're going to be in 2034. And, I'm going to be slightly older than I'm going to be that old dad at high school graduation. It's going to be just, if he graduates, whatever. I think for him, it's going to be a lot easier for me to just emotionally handle his challenges. And to recognize that when I made that switch with my daughters and allowed them to really start, again, not outside the realms of safety and their well-being, but when they fail, when they my dad, fighter pilot, the 7 Ps. You've heard the 5 Ps, proper planning prevents poor performance. For me, it was the 7 Ps. Proper pre-flight planning prevents piss poor performance, because, Air Force. So, if my kids aren't studying for an exam, or they're not doing the project, back in the day, I'd be logged into Power School or whatever app saying, "Are you ready? What do we need to do? Do you need supplies?" If they don't do it at this point, that's good. They'll learn from that. And with my son, that'll be something that's a lot easier for me to do. Like, I know it's a big project, but I also know that your success in life has nothing to do with the grade you get in your drama class in 6th grade. If you get a C.
Amen.
The important education is the stuff that, in my mind, you're not learning at school anyway, and it can relate to school. But, again, by allowing them to really fall down on their face and feel the emotions, the consequences of their decisions, their own choices. Oh, that's powerful. That is powerful.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, as we kind of start to wind down a little bit, Jennifer, your book, Building Boys, it's subtitled Raising Great Guys in a World That Misunderstands Males. And I think one of the reasons we misunderstand males is because what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Those conversations are shifting so much right now. And we're in this space right now that's real fluid. And that's why people are struggling with this stuff so much right now. It's just because it isn't settled yet. Like we've just started to pose some really big questions. We've started to ask some really big questions, and it's going to take a hot sec to figure these things out. So when you think about raising great guys, for you, what does that mean? For
me, it is really about raising decent humans, because I do think that decent human, that's what we're all striving towards.
Yes.
But I think we have to pay attention to the male part, because we still live in the world as it is right now at this moment. So the fact of the matter is, if you are perceived as a guy, there are different perceptions and expectations that go with that at this point in time than if you are perceived as a female. And understanding how those things affect how other people treat you, and how you affect how you think about yourself and what you need to do. And you guys know this, you faced a lot of pressure to behave in certain ways because you were guys. And for me, raising boys, understanding that is really important. So it's really about raising decent humans. You said it before: kind, considerate, responsible, caring. And I heard you say, Brad, a little bit ago, it really doesn't matter what grade you got in 6th grade drama class. Honestly, if we are all honest with ourselves here, it doesn't matter what grade you got in what class, period. At all and ever. These bigger things, how do we interact with our fellow humans? That's what matters. That's what matters most in life. So as hard as it is, I'm trying to teach my guys and model for them how to be with other humans in the world.
All right. Final question for you, Brad, is in your book, you say recognizing patterns, especially ones deeply rooted in our upbringing, is the first step towards change. So maybe somebody is kind of coming to that self-aware space where they're going, whoa, I guess it wasn't all roses when I was coming up. And I guess I did take some hits along the way, and holy shit, like I might be passing some of this stuff along to my own friends, family, kids, If it's the first step towards change, and that's recognizing the patterns, how do you suggest we recognize patterns? Because you don't see it until you do.
No, you're absolutely right. And a lot of it is just having the intention to do some introspection and taking a look in the mirror. But that's not always easy to do, just saying, well, I want to learn about myself, so I'm going to learn about myself, right? I mean, you've got to have people who know how to actually strip that back and get to the root of things. So I'm a big proponent of, therapy or counseling, or, for myself, and I've gone through, couples counseling. I meet with the pastor from my church on a regular basis to just talk about, my role as a dad and my role as a member of society. And it helps. I do a lot of, mindfulness meditations, and, they can be guided meditations. They can be sleep meditations, anything that allows you to really just kind of like let it go. I think a lot of us deal with in a lot of different roles, just the idea of like the imposter syndrome. And that's not just like a work thing. As a parent as well, I think there are a lot more really good parents out there than feel and recognize like they are as good as they are, and they're doing as good of a job as they are being a parent. But it's recognizing that, hey, I do have some value and I am doing some very good things. Reading, listening, you don't have to binge watch, Breaking Bad or whatever it is you want to binge watch. Throw in a TED Talk or a documentary, or read a book or listen to a book, and the things you want to focus on, find people who are really in tune with that topic and listen to them, talk to them, reach out to them. And Jennifer, you'd probably, be a good person to ask just because you're in this conversation period. But if you had somebody randomly reach out to you based on reading your book, I would argue that you'd probably be excited and want to respond and engage in a conversation versus saying, oh, it's just somebody else. I don't have time for this.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I started a Facebook group called Building Boys even before the book, because parents need places to connect with other parents, to hear, yep, this is normal. Yeah, it's hard. Yep, he's going to come around. We need those spaces. I just want to say, though, I feel the need, like you've been spying on me, man, because I do think I'm a pretty good parent. I'm not perfect. And I'm currently on my second binge watch through Breaking Bad. So like those things are not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not. They're not. The one other thing that I would say before, jumping off of this is something that I'm very inconsistent with, but I'm very good about when I need to be is, just journaling and
yes.
really writing down, because it helps you to really, in the moment, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking. And then when you go back to that, whether with a counselor or a therapist or yourself at some point, when you learn to do that, you're able to then process and really understand getting through and navigating what it was you were feeling at that moment.
And it can really help you recognize patterns. What you started by saying, because in the moment, there's emotions, there's all that stuff. And when I journal, sometimes I tend to journal in the morning, right? So it might be the next morning when I'm having a cup of coffee and it's quiet. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, there I am. There I'm doing that same thing again. And sometimes you won't see it right away, but you journal for enough time and certain themes keep coming up and revealing themselves.
Sure. And some people think like, oh, I don't want to write all this stuff down. I have friends who are really good about just doing the voice memos in their iPhones, and it transcribes it for you. You're just talking. You're talking, you're speaking your feelings, you're just getting it off your chest, and it's there. It's so simple to do.
Yeah. Well, you guys have served up an excellent roadmap for people to become self-aware and figure out if they too need to step into that idea of being a transitional character. And I love this conversation so much. And I'm going to end with this. You mentioned this idea of being an imposter just a few minutes ago. And I saw the most incredible reel the other day, and it suggested this. Okay. We're sitting there, we're feeling like the imposter, right? Because we're like, oh, I'm not a great dad, or I'm not a great mom, and all these things. The imposter is the one thinking those thoughts. Get your head around that. The imposter is, you're not the imposter. You're the true, real deal. The imposter is the one thinking the thoughts.
That's outstanding.
Oh, change the game for me. And I have used that more in the last 2 weeks on myself than anything that I have learned in the last year. And so I just think that's a fantastic thing to throw out there.
I appreciate that. Now that's going to be going through my head for the next many weeks. But that's only going to help me, because we hold ourselves back.
Yes. And that's not us. That is the imposter. The one with all that negative, that's the imposter. Get rid of the imposter. Yeah.
Respectable.
Yeah, buddy, it sure is, right? Well, Brad, Jennifer, thank you guys so much for being on Learn from People Who Lived It. And we're going to connect our audience to you guys in our show notes. And I encourage everybody to give them a follow. Brad, when's this book going to be out for you? Do you know?
Not yet. I'm working through a couple decisions on some things there. I'll keep you posted for sure, though.
Well, Jennifer, you know a thing or two about writing books, and it's a process, right?
It is a process.
It is a process. But you can go to jenniferlwfink.com right now, and you can pre-order the book. Everything's right there on her website. Guys, have an amazing day and the rest of your week, okay?
Absolute
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcast. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
I'd like you to consider for just a moment that more than half of the people who are listening to the sound of my voice will have a heart attack, stroke, or heart failure in their lifetime. However, research shows us that up to 90% of heart disease and stroke is preventable. I think about my own father who died by heart attack at just 47 years old, and I wonder how much longer he'd be around if we'd just known about Health Span MD. Dr. Todd Hurst, a board-certified cardiologist, is not just my doctor. He's helped thousands of people just like you and me with his approach. Health Span MD is the way healthcare is supposed to be. An ongoing partnership between you and your expert healthcare team that guides you step by step on the best opportunities to achieve your health, weight, and longevity goals. Please take a minute and sign up for his 3-step consultation and witness the Health Span MD difference for yourself, so you can be here longer for your family and, most importantly, yourself. HealthSpanMD.com. HealthSpan MD, an insurance-based practice.